Begin by taking everything out of the bag and laying it out on a table or on the floor in front of you. And once you have all the pieces out, then you can start organizing them by groups. So the first thing you're going to see is the long plates, which are there. That's the front and back wall, all the plates to the front and back wall. There's the side walls, front and back plates, the glue gun, ruler, and then the green label studs are the pre-cuts. Those are the trimmers. And then you have all the headers and miscellaneous other pieces that you're going to be working with. And some pencils and markers you might need there. You're going to begin by grabbing the layout ruler that has the notches in it. And this will allow you to lay the studs out. You're going to start from the left edge there. And you grab the 30-inch bottom plate. And you can see it says edge of plate right there. You're going to line it up right with the edge. And you want to have it so you can mark it on the edge of the plate, not on the flat. So once you get the edge lined up, you're going to mark the left side of the notch. See here. And then you're going to put an X to the right of that. And so the stud will line up on the line and be on the side where the X is. And you continue working your way down the ruler, marking the left side of each stud location. And then an X puts the stud on the right side. Once you've done that, then you're going to get the top plate, which will be the same length, 30 inches. So you can see the bottom plate there, all marked out all the way down. Okay, so that's as if we're only putting studs in there, nothing else, but you line up the left side of the top plate. Again, on the edge, you're going to start marking the lines as they were on the bottom plate. So you just transfer the markings onto the top plate, lined up with the bottom plate. And you'll continue doing that down the length of the top plate till they're all marked off. So you can see here that we've done marked both the top and the bottom plate all the way down, right to the end. So there's the top plate and there's the bottom plate. Now technically, if we were only putting studs in, you'd start putting the green colored studs in, the pre-cuts, right on the X's. And if there were no windows or doors, you would just be able to fill the whole wall up with studs, right on the marks as you see them here. But there are windows and doors in. This is the front wall, so we're going to look at adding the windows and doors. So for each window and door, we have a pre-cut stud, which is green. We have a jack stud, which is orange. And on the other side, we have a jack stud and then a pre-cut stud as well. On the top, we have the header, and the header is made up of three parts. The plate, which is the bottom, you see that here, green and blue, for a 3-foot door. And then the green and blue header components that are put up vertically. So this is for a 3-foot door. So you begin by gluing the trimmer or jack stud to the pre-cut stud called the king stud, and you line up the bottoms. So you line up the bottoms and press it together, and when you do that, you see you produce a little notch for the header up top. You'll do the same on the other side, grabbing the jack stud or trimmer. Again, glue that up on the side, and you'll glue that right to the king stud or the pre-cut wall stud, which is green. Again, lining up the bottoms and holding them together for a few seconds, and that will allow them to stay glued together. Once you have those two done, you'll move on to the header itself. So you grab the two 9/16 flat, the bigger header pieces, and you glue them together on their faces. So you see that being done here. Again, line up the one edge flush and squeeze them together, kind of feeling that all edges are flush. And then you glue the 1/2 inch bottom plate to the header. And that's the more narrow of those three pieces. It's the same width as the material for the studs and the king studs and the jack studs. So you can see it being glued together. Again, lining up the edges. You see that's a 3-footer, the green and blue. If you look at the coding chart for that, it'll tell you what size that is. Then basically the header slides into and sits on top of the trimmers or the jack studs, and then you glue it up and it creates a doorway. So that little pocket at the top of the joining of the jack stud and the king stud, you'll glue up in that little area there. See that being done here. And then you fit the header right in there, hold it for a few seconds, and then you'll do the same on the other side as well. Glue in the pocket. And then squeeze those together. Try to keep the studs aligned so they don't spread out or get too wide at the bottom, because there's nothing to keep them there. And you see now the opening for a door. Once you have that done, we're moving on to a 6-foot window, which is in the front wall. And that, you see, has similar pieces. The only difference is there's a few more parts to it. So again, you're going to have the king stud, the jack stud, that's on both sides. You're going to have cripples, which are on the bottom, which would be where the studs traditionally would be. You'll have a sill plate, that's what the window would sit on, the bottom of the opening. You have the header material. Again, this one's brown and blue, so that's the 6-foot one. Got 3 parts of that. The bottom plate to the header, and then the 2 header pieces. And that's what comprises the 6-foot window opening. So again, you're going to start by gluing the orange trimmer or jack stud to the king stud on the sides. And you'll do both of those, one for each side of the window. So very similar to what the door process was. Again, you flush up the bottoms and it creates a notch at the top. We'll do one for the other side on the trimmer or jack stud, and then gluing that to the actual king stud. Flushing the bottoms, holding them tight for a few seconds. Let them harden. Then we'll put the header together. Again, putting the 2 bigger header pieces flat against each other, gluing them together. Flushing up the edges, keeping them lined up. And then you'll put the plate on the bottom of it. So you glue up the edge. Kind of covering both pieces there. Making one edge flush and the ends flush. And that header will drop in just like it did for the door. So you can glue the ends together, slide them in. Except in this case, the window will have a sill, a bottom to it, with some cripples. So that'll be a little bit different than it was for the door. So there it is glued together. Now the one thing is you can slide this back and forth. It can pretty much go anywhere, but a lot of times in this case we're going to line the left edge up of either the door or the window where the king stud is lined up on one of the X's. It just saves on material this way, and it doesn't really matter for us right now, so you'd line it up right on that X to save an extra stud. If you put it in between the studs, you'd end up using one more stud. On the right hand side, it doesn't matter where it lays out at this time. So again, same thing at the bottom, it'll line up, left side will line up on the X, and then the sill plate will go in, and the cripples will go below that. So the cripples will have to be lined up on the sill plate like the X's are. So the first thing you do is put one of the cripples on the left side against the jack stud, and then one on the right side. That'll support the sill plate, like you see there. And you can get that. Now, you're going to need a layout on the sill plate to know exactly where those studs go. So you see, if you line it up, you don't really know where they fit on that sill plate. So we got to transfer those markings from the bottom plate onto the sill plate. And there's a couple different ways to do that. One of the ways is to line up the bottoms and then line up the sill plate with the bottom plate and transfer it onto the bottom plate. This gets to be a little tricky, but if you can get this done right, it works okay. So once the sill plate's in the right position and you've got the studs lined up on the X, you can transfer that mark. So I'm going to turn it on edge here so you can see it. I'm going to transfer those marks, okay, right there, the left side, and then you'll put an X on those spots. So there's a trimmer or a cripple right there, and then you'll have that working its way down to the right where you mark location of the last two cripples there. They're called cripples because they're cut off studs. They're part of a stud. So then again, you'll see here that I'm just going to transfer that to the edge of the sill plate so it's easy to see when you lay it down. So this is just one way to do that. There's other ways, but in this case we're going to start by putting one cripple against the jack stud on the left side, flushing up the bottoms. Here I push them right against the bottom plate to hold them flush. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same to the other side. I'm going to glue this cripple the right side, and this is for a 6040, which means 6 foot by 4 foot opening. So these are 4 foot cripple studs. Then we're going to put the sill plate on there, okay, and glue that in place. And you can see that we have markings now for the location of the other cripples onto the sill plate. So again, this is a 4 foot high window. And so the smaller of the cripple studs, the orange on both ends, are the ones you're going to be looking for. We have cripples that are cut for 4.0 windows, 3.0 windows, and 2.0 windows. So you just glue them to the top first. You see how they'll line up properly when we tip that up onto the wall. If you do that right and keep them pretty straight, you can see it's important to push them in tight and straight. You can see how it lines up the lines there. And then if I glued it on, it would fit very nicely. So another way to do that is to line up the notches on the left king stud, okay, and then transfer that onto the sill plate. So you can see how the left one is lined up on the left edge. Notice that I'm not using the edge of the ruler. That's a different layout. So I'm using from stud to stud. And I'm going to mark the left side of that, the left side, and so on down the line. And then I'll mark an X to the right-hand side of that layout. And so I'll put the X on here. And that will work as well. So you can do it either way. They both work well. This way is a little less difficult because you're only holding a ruler. The other way you got a whole lot of pieces. So there's the door and the window done. Now we have one other window, a 3.0 window that's also in the front wall. And again, you have this pretty much the same layout. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. You have the header. It's also a 3.0, green and blue. You have the sill plate, okay, which is light blue on the end, and you have the cripples at the bottom, along with the jack stud and the king stud. So I'm going to put that together. I'm not going to force you to watch it because you've seen it done, and there are all three pieces that go on the front wall. So where they go is up to you. You can line them up wherever you want, but remember the left side of each of those structures, these openings, is going to line up on one of the X's that line up on a stud, and that's just to save studs. We could put it between, but you just burn up more material that way. So because it doesn't, in this case, doesn't necessarily matter. So it's not attached to the bottom yet. The first thing we're going to do is tip that up on edge, and then we're going to glue the bottom, in this case the 6.0 window, to the bottom plate first. So you can see I put enough glue on each of the X's, and then I'm going to make sure it fits on there, and if I have to adjust any of the cripples or anything else, if I do it right, I can move my fingers, but they're all lining up pretty nice in this case. You see it right on the X there, left edge, and the king stud is to the right of it, and the rest of it lines up pretty well. So there you have an opening. So again, we're going to do the same with the door and the window. Find out its location. Left hand king stud, which is green, is going to line up on one of the X's. And again, the other one may not line up on an X because it's a specific opening. It may not lay out properly. In this case, it lays out pretty close on the right-hand side as well. So that works out well. Just hold it in place for a few seconds, and voila, you have a door. So we have a door and a window standing up. Lastly, we got the 3.0 window assembly. Again, we're going to line it up on the left-hand side. I'm just making sure we put the glue in the right spot here. So we line it up on the left, make sure everything lines up pretty well, and you see it lays out pretty close on the right as well. Not exactly, it's kind of on the wrong side of the line, but in this case it works out pretty well. So there you have the openings for the front wall. Then what we're going to do is lay that back down and put some studs in there on the X's. So you can kind of get a feel of what that should be like. Now you see I've started to place some studs attached to the bottom. I'll continue that along to the right side, filling in all the X's. There you have it completed. Now there's one other thing that needs to be done. Over on each of the ends of the wall, there's a special type of corner called a California corner that has to go right here. It also has to go at the other end as well. And that's what you're seeing here, where we turn one perpendicular, and the reason for that is for a nailing, mainly for the inside of the sheetrock inside the house. So we'll get more back to that later. On this side it doesn't really fit because of the layout of the studs, so you'll see here I try to kind of lay it in place, but there's not really enough room, and we would have nailing because the first stud in to the left actually would work on that pretty well. So in that case you won't need to fit one in there, but generally you do. You have what's called the California corner. Now you're going to glue the top on, and basically it's a good way to glue part of it on and then kind of slide the other pieces out and get it attached properly, and you have the first wall built. So that's the front wall, and the locations again are pretty much up to you. Now I have my paper laid out on the table here, and the outside edges of the grid are dotted red. You see them here. That's the front edge, outside edge of the location of the walls, front and side wall. So basically you would tip this wall up and line it up right on that front edge. And in this case I want you to tape it down. Don't glue it down yet. It kind of falls over, so I added a piece of wood kind of leaning on it so you can see it there. Obviously when we get the sidewall up, you can see I got a piece of tape on it there, a couple pieces, but it still kind of wants to fall over, so I propped it up with a piece of wood like you see at this end for now. Once I get the sidewall connected to it, then it will stand up pretty easily on its own. So in this case, You can see I'm right on the outside edge there, and that's where the side wall will butt into it. And with that, you have the front wall done.